evening to you and welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Barger.
And I'm Hex.
Well, Hex, it's been a bit of a quiet year for the Wii, hasn't it? But we've had plenty of requests over the last few weeks to check out Xenoblade Chronicles, and we started to do just that.
Yes, and so far it's pretty good. I love the soundtrack, and we've barely scratched the surface, and I'm already so in love with the characters.
I love their wacky accents that don't quite match the dubbing.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a close one.
But we are getting ahead of ourselves. We wanted to get a head start on Xenoblade because it is such a big game, but, it could all go pear-shaped from here, so we'll have that review next week. This week on the show, the spiritual successor to Black, Bodycount.
Target terminated.
Plus, we explore the imaginative worlds of Shaddai, Ascension of the Metatron.
And our field reporter Goose has been out and about this week, meeting up with a few gamers who've been getting real achievements from their gaming.
We bought a console and popped it into the rehab gym and found out that rather than drag these young men down to the gym, they were lined up outside the door in their wheelchair just wanting to get in.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
What you got there, Hex?
Oh, well, viewer D Manic sent us another couple of zombies that he made. How cool.
Would you like to add them to the set?
Well, I'd love to do the honours.
I'll go read the news.
Okay.
Good game. A recent study has concluded that it's not violence in video games that causes aggression, but competitive gaming. Researchers at the Brock University in Canada conducted a series of experiments on gamers using a proven method for determining aggression, known as the hot sauce paradigm. In the first experiment, half the gamers played the non-violent race of Fuel, while the rest played the violent action game Conan. Gamers were then told to make a dish using hot sauce for someone who doesn't like hot and spicy foods, with the theory being the more hot sauce used, the greater the aggression displayed. The test showed no difference in the levels of aggression between players of violent and non-violent games. A second experiment then chose games based on how competitive they are, adding both Mortal Kombat vs DC and Marble Blast Ultra, while swapping Conan with Left 4 Dead. Using the same hot sauce test, researchers noted a strong increase in aggression from those who had played the more competitive games. Since their release in the early to mid-90s, the classic shooters Doom and Doom 2 have been unavailable to gamers in Germany. The country's Federal Department for Media Harmful to Young Persons had originally ruled the games to be as harmful as pornography. However, the games have now been delisted after a successful appeal by id Software's parent company, Bethesda Softworks. German gamers may soon be able to enjoy what the rest of the world has been playing for close to 20 years. Crysis developer Crytek has strongly refuted a blog claiming the studio has been mistreating its employees. The blog claims employees were treated as disposable pieces of meat, leading to 16 staff resigning or being unlawfully dismissed. Crytek co-founder Avni Yerli hit back at the claims, saying, "These are completely misleading accusations. We always comply with German labor codes. It's very distressing for us that an individual thinks we have been treating them unfairly." Back in 2006, you might remember a rather hyped up game for PS2 and Xbox called Black. Developed by Criterion Games, they were hoping to do for shooters what Burnout did for racing games.
Black turned out to be pretty good, even if it didn't quite live up to the hype. The dev team had even bigger and better ideas for Black 2, but after falling out with EA, some of those original developers decided to take those ideas and create a spiritual successor instead. That game is Bodycount.
In Bodycount, you are a member of the network, an agent responsible for sorting out political situations that have gone a bit messy, and you do this by shooting everyone. There's a villainous group residing in Tron-like bunkers around the world who appear to be responsible for causing all the unrest. Hex, I'm a patient gamer, but I haven't rage quit this much in a long time. I had to play this game in really short, angry bursts.
Bodycount tries to do a few new things, but ultimately none of it really comes together, and we should probably talk about why. This is a shooter, but it throws you right into the action with very little setup. There are only a handful of levels, really, and while they are sizable, they don't look very defined, and you'll really be bothered by that graininess.
Yeah, it's not a very good-looking game, and these levels too, they just pinball you around a bunch of markers, whether you either press X or hold X before you can move on, and it just feels lazy and tedious. For example, sometimes you'll be sent to one checkpoint and then they'll send you off to another another one, and then they'll send you straight back there. It all just feels like everything in this game is there to extend its length, but it's all at the gamer's expense.
Yeah, it just feels mean, and there's no difficulty setting, but all of it is really, really hard. Deaths feel cheap, and there's not enough warning to let you know when you're low on health. You do respawn instantly, but there are many occasions where you'll die maybe 10 times, and it just makes you rage.
I found if you pick your way through the enemies slowly, it does help a bit, but the checkpoints are so bad that by the time you've reached your objective and triggered it, you're probably going to get wiped out from the oncoming enemies anyway. Ah!
Let's talk about the gunplay, Barger, because that's the key to why this is so hard. The focus is on a lean and peek system. When zooming in on an enemy, moving the left stick will make you duck and weave in and out of behind cover, so it encourages you to use cover and lean around it. The trouble is, it's very restrictive because while you're zoomed, you can't move your body to strafe, so you're actually stuck on a dime.
Yeah, you kind of feel like this and you can't go anywhere. I don't know how everyone else plays console FPS, but when I zoom in, I want a bit of freedom of movement, and there's just no way to turn this off. And because this was so restrictive, I found I wouldn't zoom in at all, and I just kind of wing it, but that has its own problems. And in the end, I just hid in a corner and hoped enemies would come around the corner and I'd be able to pick them off one by one.
I just imagine you curled up in a corner in a ball. Yeah. Please don't shoot.
That's pretty much how it went.
Until you adjust the sensitivity, everything just feels sluggish, which doesn't help. And on top of all that, the recoil of the guns just makes things even tougher.
Yeah, it really does your fingers in when you're zoomed in, doesn't it? Because you have to have a finger on each trigger as well as finagle the sticks. And
it's only when you get the heavy machine gun later on that things don't get so bad, but that's mainly because you don't have to reload as much. And the reload itself is buggy. I mean, sometimes it takes 3 pushes of the button. And if you try to sprint after you've reloaded, you really have to wait for the full animation to play out before you sprint. Otherwise, it cancels it halfway through.
Very frustrating. There is a fair bit of destruction, but it's pretty basic wall crumble stuff. And in fact, it gets in the way because you can't work out whether you can blow open some doors or not, and you need to progress in certain situations. We will wrap this up in a second, but Hex, we should talk about the horribly unbalanced AI.
Yeah, they're just too awesome at shooting you, and then half the time they don't see you at all. You will just want to race through this game, and the game really becomes about out-surviving and outsmarting the enemy. I found it was easier just to risk it and sprint through a level, dropping mines as I went into groups of enemies and hoping that distracted them enough so that I could make it to the next point.
It gets even harder when you're in those Tron-like areas, I found, because it's just all tight and confined. There's a power bar that you manage which fills up the more enemies that you kill, and it has kind of a bullet storm emphasis on scoring with the kills. But the problem is it takes a lot of enemies to kill to fill this up, and then it runs out so quick that it feels kind of wasted. And half of the abilities are kind of pointless anyway. Body count might have been bearable if enemies had less health and you had more, but then it would only be a 3-hour game. And Hex, I know it sounds really mean, but I cheered when those credits came up. I'm giving this 3 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I think they were going for a fast-paced, action-intensive game, but really it just feels old and punishing. I'm giving it 3 out of 10 as well.
Also, if I could recommend, if you do pick up this game, turn the vibrate settings down. Not every single bullet needs to vibrate, and these hands have a lot of gaming ahead of them, Hex. You gotta protect the joints.
It was pretty intense, wasn't it?
Protect the bones.
Good game.
All right, Hex, it's time to help solve someone's software slump, or just answer a question or two.
All right, well, how about this one from Peter in Broken Hill?
I like that one. This one's all right too. That one's not bad.
Stop it. Dear Good Game, in Duke Nukem Forever, how do you unlock the secret closet at the end of the fork stop? P.S. You dudes rock. Thanks, Peter, and yes, this is a bit of a sneaky Easter egg, but here's what you need to do. First, you need to hop in the forklift, raise the fork in front of it, and park it here. Use it as a makeshift staircase to get you up to this landing, and then take a look down this dark alcove. You may need to use your Duke vision.
Well, looky there, it's a companion barrel. Grab this and run to the other side of the room where you'll find this heart symbol on the floor. Drop the barrel here and bingo. You'll not only unlock that secret closet of goodies, but you'll get a Chivo too.
All right, well, time for another. How about this one from Ripley Scott in Adelaide, South Australia?
Hey guys, last week was the first week I actually saw a game I was intrigued in, Deus Ex Human Revolution. I bought it the day after I watched the show, and I'm up to the 3rd boss in the room with all the weird bodies that change. I can't for the life of me beat him. Please help.
Alright, well, a slight non-story spoiler warning here. If you're not up to the third boss and you want to figure it out for yourself, then go away for about 30 seconds starting now.
Okay, firstly, we had a few frag mines and the Typhoon system all at this point, so this is the approach we're going to recommend. If you don't have those, then you'll need to figure out something else. Start off by immediately throwing a couple of frag mines right in front of him, then just back away and let him walk into them.
Next, we use the Typhoon system as a bit of an I win button. Just run right up to him and unleash the Typhoon, as he can't hurt you while you're using it and he'll get stunned by it as well. Then just rinse and repeat a few times, shooting him as much as possible at any given chance. Don't forget that the bases of each statue are actually little storage pods full of ammo and stuff, which is seriously helpful.
Hex, I loved that Typhoon system. It saw me through so many tough fights.
It's great, although once I accidentally set it off in the middle of the street and that ended rather badly.
Well, that's all we've got for Ask Good Game this week. If there is something we can help you with, send it to us here.
Hello?
We've got to get to the sea people and save them from the things.
That's...
Good game.
On Spawn Point, over on ABC3, we recently reviewed the latest Rugby World Cup game. If you want to see how it fared, you can check out what we said on the SP website. It was strangely fun, but, you know, a bit of a low-budget title.
Speed is his trademark, and there's no try for Australia.
Now, on the other end of the football scale is the big-budget glitz and glamour of an entirely different type of code.
I see what you did there. Football code, game code, nice punnage.
That's right, Badge. It's time to snap the pigskin.
I hold my money with my left, got the world in my right pocket. Smoker, stove in my right, in between counting my profits. Poker faces, I soak up the taste. This display of women on my sofa, doing the type of things I love so much. But so what? I'm skeezy as that.
Barjo, neither one of us are the biggest fans of American football, right? I mean, we should probably just put that out there.
Yeah, in fact, I'm not ashamed to admit that when people talk to me about sport in general, I tend to just go to my happy place.
Hey Barchug, it was a game on the weekend, Parramatta and Titans. Jared
Swimming through the sea with my little seahorse. His name is Jimmy Bouncers. Jimmy Bouncers! Jimmy Bouncers!
awesome game.
Yep. However, sport video games is a completely different story, and Madden is one of those games that has been around since the 16-bit era, so I was curious to see where the franchise is at.
Well, how long has it been since you've played one?
It's been a little while, but you know, EA pump out these games as yearly updates, so I think the assumption is that you haven't missed that much if you skipped a year or two. I think the big reaction from most people when they check out one of these is, how is it different from the previous game? Have they finally crafted the perfect game?
Well, first impressions are that Madden 12 is most definitely groaning at the seams with features and content.
This is true, and it's relatively easy to jump right in and find your feet. It doesn't take long to get into the groove of throwing the ball, catching it, and dodging dudes left and right until you score a satisfying touchdown.
He's got it! Touchdown! They take a late lead!
To get to grips with the controls and all the NFL rules, though, you'll have to read the in-game manual and then stuff about in the practice mode, and the game does little to guide you. It annoyed me that there was no comprehensive tutorial in this game, Barjo. I mean, there's an incredible depth to the tactics at your disposal in a sport like this. NFL is notorious for having a gazillion plays on both offense and defense. And it's all a bit hard to digest. I mean, I would have thought that EA would have done everything they possibly could to make this game accessible.
Yeah, it was a bit surprising that there's no tutorial, but this is a game made by Americans for Americans who know their sport backwards and inside out. But I also think you can still have quite a bit of fun experimenting. The game does at least point out which button corresponds to which receiver, as well as draw lines on the ground so you'll know where they'll make their runs. And it does automate some of the player movements, so I think if it's been a while since you picked up one of these games, you can fumble your way through.
Yeah, maybe, but it was an indication to me that it felt, I don't know, a little bit undercooked.
Well, as to how it's different from last year's game, it's just a case of a few small tweaks. 12 has added things like custom playbooks, a new collision system to lessen those canned animations, and the presentation has been jazzed up to make it feel more like a TV broadcast. And it has 3D grass.
It's the grass of the future.
Yeah. To be honest though, it doesn't look as good as I thought it would. It just doesn't have that attention to detail. I did get a bit obsessed with checking out all the mascots though. What kind of animal's that?
I have no idea. One new feature which I did think was a great idea is that the confidence levels of your players fluctuate during the ups and downs of the game. So not only do you have to worry about your own performance, but you also need to manage the side effects that result from individual players having a bad game or hitting a hot streak. That That brought the experience to life a bit more for me and definitely pushes Madden down that simulation path.
It does, but I think EA are still struggling to find the balance with this game. If you look at FIFA, they've got the balance perfect there. Hardcore and casual players just freaking love that game. But here, it's solid, but it still feels a little soulless. Anyway, final thoughts?
Well, there's certainly enough depth to the franchise mode and creating your own NFL superstar career, and I think NFL fans will be pretty satisfied on the whole. But it's not the kind of game that will really win over new fans through sheer compelling gameplay, so I'm giving it 6.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
It's still a comprehensive package though, I think, and there's lots to keep you busy too, like trading players online and taking your team to the Super Bowl. If you haven't played Madden in a while, it might be worth checking out, but it's still not a must-have, so I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
And lately, he's had a few physical issues that slowed him down a bit, but when he's right, he is almost impossible to stop.
And Chris.
Good game.
Gaming is sometimes associated with a variety of physical ailments, everything from bad posture to deep vein thrombosis.
But as our field reporter Goose has discovered, gaming can also have some very important therapeutic benefits.
Development of modified video games that are aiding the rehabilitation of stroke and spinal cord injury patients, video gameplay is getting serious. And the man behind it all is neuroscientist Dr. Stuart Smith.
Unfortunately, spinal cord units are populated by young men. Young men do dangerous things. They drive too fast, they play dangerous sports, and very often they end up fracturing their spine. We saw the Sony PlayStation iToy, which was a new gaming console technology on the market at the time that involved people moving their hands around to interact with game elements. And pretty quickly we saw that it mapped onto the kinds of movements that people need to do in their rehabilitation. So we bought a console and popped it into the rehab gym and found out that rather than drag these young men down to the gym, they were lined up outside the door in their wheelchair just wanting to get in. So that was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I thought, video games are a really good way to engage people in rehabilitation.
I think it's wonderful for guys in a wheelchair to be able to use it in general and obviously complete online. It's something, a bit of a level playing field.
I play online with other people, from the raging teenager to the lonely mom. This is my mouse, and I move the mouse with the joystick, like this. And with this mouse, if I sip, it goes into a left click. And when I blow, it goes to a right click. And on World of Warcraft, I used to raid with a guild, and we're pretty much the third best raiding guild circa 6 months ago.
The idea that it's doing a physiotherapy workout at the same time, helping balance, helping strength, helping hand function, I mean, it's all good. It can't be any better.
Like, playing this game's really good because you know how when you mention exercise to me, I'm like, oh no. But when you mention the game, like playing the game, I won't even notice that I'm actually doing an exercise, so it's pretty good.
It used to be the case we thought that if you've had brain damage, that was it. You've lost brain sort of function for a long time. We now know that if you get people to repeatedly make arm movements, practice physical movements, then they can get some return of function. Now, when I first saw Fruit Ninja, I thought, okay, there's a game that we could use to get people to do lots of this, and it would be fun for them to engage in their rehabilitation. But for some patients, if they can't move their arms very quickly, then they'll never be able to swipe the fruit. So I rang up Chanel Dio, who's the CEO of Half Brick Studios, and I said to Chanel, you know, you've got a great game, but if you could give me access to the one parameter in your game that controls the speed of the fruit, I'd be able to make that fruit much slower so that patients could actually chop the fruit in half. And he said, oh, that's a fantastic idea. I'll throw some of my resources at it. And within a couple of weeks, I had a modified version of Fruit Ninja.
Meanwhile, some older gamers are getting in on the action too. They get to play video games as part of their everyday physical therapy. It's another way to use games in health, this time to help older people reduce the risk of falls. There's some sweet old-time tunes and plenty of toe-tapping fun.
So you're getting plenty of practice with your stepping with this game, aren't you?
Yes.
And that's ideal. It's really improving your ability to keep your balance. We know that exercise is a really good way to reduce the risk of falls in older people. And so one of the games that we're using at the moment is a modified version of Dance Dance Revolution. I know you probably think Dance Dance Revolution is for young, fit, crazy people, but we've modified the game sufficiently so that we can slow it down and put in age-appropriate music so that older people like to dance with the game.
What I find is that I'm forgetting about my balance and trying to concentrate on all my other movements.
People really enjoy playing these games, whereas before, coming down to the gym might have been a bit tedious, a bit boring. Now they're actually doing something that's fun and they just really enjoy it and they want to do more of it.
One more. Come on.
You're the Beckham of this game.
Lucky game.
The reactions I get when they found out that I'm a quadriplegic is, really? You seem to be good at this. You can't possibly be playing with your mouth. Just your mouth.
We've got really good creative game developing community here. Games are going to enable us to really radically transform the way that we deliver healthcare services.
So for any manufacturers or producers of games out there, keep them coming where they don't necessarily need the use of your legs, and we can join in as well.
Good game.
El Shaddai, Ascension of the Metatron, follows the story of Enoch, who I think is a priest or something, and is tasked with seeking out 7 fallen angels and showing them what for to prevent God's great flood from destroying mankind.
Right. Time to go.
I think that's right. You'll have to forgive me if some of that is wrong. The Book of Enoch is one of those lesser referenced religious texts, so even though I did some research, I still have no idea what's going on. I think Enoch is Noah's grandfather.
Right, well, nevertheless, you and your dreamy blonde hair fight your way from heaven through a series of biblical baddies, aided by the angel Lucifer.
Let me tell you a tale. It took place 14,000 years ago.
I think we all know how that friendship is going to turn out. But for now, he seems to be doing his best to sort you out with weapons and the necessary info you need to complete your heavenly task.
An arch.
He's also a rather snappy dresser, although he never stops talking on his mobile phone.
I'm telling you, it's not gonna be a problem. Look, he's figured out how to use everything so far.
Yeah, unlike Enoch, who seems to be wearing skinny jeans and this weird kind of white armor over it that makes him look like a sexy stormtrooper. His weapons are fairly cool though, if a little limited. The first one you're given is the batleth, which is kind of an arched blade that you can swing at enemies and also lets you extend your jump with a bit of a glide. You also get a ranged weapon, which lets you fire bullets at enemies, and a kind of shield which splits in two, becoming a heavy defensive pair of gauntlets.
The weapons are pretty interesting, but the combat isn't really. I was expecting a much more complex fighting system in a game like this. Really, most of it involves combining combos with the timed hitting of your one attack button. Then you have jump, block, dodge, and also purify, which is something you have to do every time your weapon gets too smothered in unholy enemy goo, which weakens it. And that felt a bit redundant.
Yeah, I agree. The combat got really boring really quickly. My favorite weapon was that ranged one because it allowed me to kind of, I don't know, jump about a bit and mix up the intensity of my fire. And many weapons did feel more effective on particular enemies, but you can only hold one weapon at a time. It's not like you can just cycle through them at will. Many enemies will be using one of the same 3 weapons as you, however, so if you stun them, you can hit left bumper and Enoch will steal their weapon from them, giving you some option of variety.
Also, these random color-coded fireballs can be struck, and you can stash a new weapon that way. There were a few semi-enjoyable boss fights thrown in, but nothing that really makes you change your combat style in a vastly different way.
Did you seriously think you could beat me?
Eventually you do gain the ability to draw on the power of the angels to help you out, and that is pretty badass, but I mean overall, yeah, the combat was just too simple and really uninteresting. I mean, I found I just did stick to that one same weapon and spam the same few moves over and over because it was just quicker.
The most impressive part of El Shaddai is the look of the game. It's very visually different. The levels are quite unique and beautiful. The art style is almost minimalist, with some really interesting colors and designs that constantly vary from one zone to the next, and music to complement each.
I loved the design. I could talk about it all day. I thought it was just beautiful, and it reminded me of something out of some bizarre dreamscape. That being said, that minimalism gave it this expansive feel, but despite that openness, it's quite a restrictive linear game, isn't it?
Yeah, and much of the way you navigate through these areas is through some pretty treacherous platforming, and I thought that could have been executed a bit better.
Yeah, you know, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the platforming in Alice Madness Returns, only in Alice you had control of the camera, so you're better able to sort of maneuver around the world and judge distances. The focus on the design of the world here means a real lack of freedom to move about in the actual world itself. There are invisible walls, the camera is fixed, and it's just frustratingly annoying jumping gaps when you can't properly judge the distance.
Yeah, and it felt like this was done on purpose too, but it just makes it more about guesswork than actual skill. However, things do improve when you enter the 2D platforming areas of the game, and again, special attention here has been paid to the beautiful aesthetics, and just the look of it is gorgeous.
Those 2D sections were my favourite part of the game, Badge. I mean, once again, just really great visual design, and I really liked the fact that they incorporated the weapons in there too. Because certain weapons change the length and duration of your jumps, they also apply to platforming, so you have the opportunity to chop and change your weapon choice here too. I had great fun with these sections, and thankfully there were a lot of them. And I think if this had been like a downloadable game comprised entirely of those 2D areas, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. The rest of the game just felt really bland, and the simplicity made it feel almost unfinished, in spite of how good it looked.
And those cutscenes, it just took way too long to convey anything, and the characters took too long to say anything, and all these long, drawn-out shots from lots of different angles. Get to the point, you're not Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And what about that part where you had to watch the credits like 20 minutes into the game while you're fighting baddies, and that side-scrolling section just went for ages, and it was so boring and I couldn't skip it.
Not getting any younger here. This is a case of style over substance. If you time your combos right, you can get some fluid combat in there, but it's just too simple, Hex. And after the first hour, I was pretty bored of this, so I'm giving it 4.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
You know, after watching that opening cutscene, I was kind of under the impression that I'd be playing as Lucifer. I mean, he seemed like a more interesting character, even if he did spend half his time on the phone. So I was kind of disappointed with my Stormtrooper hero. But, you know, aside from the art and design of the game and those 2D sections, there wasn't a whole lot else that I really enjoyed. So I'm giving it 5.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
So did you guess the game for this week?
Scorpion! Huh. Aced it.
It was the 1994 Mega Drive game Bodycount. This on-rail shooting gallery was originally released for something called the Sega Channel, a subscription-only service in the USA that delivered games over a cable television connection. So there's actually no way anyone in Australia could have guessed that game.
Well, I don't know. I like to think good game viewers are exceptionally knowledgeable, and it was eventually released on cartridge.
Well, we'll go easier on you next week, but also next week we'll hopefully have some better games.
The long-awaited Warhammer shooter has finally entered orbit, Warhammer Space Marine.
They want to steal this world. Let them try.
Also, as we mentioned at the start of the show, we'll be checking out Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii.
Man, what were you doing wandering off by yourself? Stay where I can keep an eye on you.
Don't forget, if you want to take part in our fanboys versus haters debate on the Grand Theft Auto series, we want your rants on video, so grab a camera and get filming, and check our website for details.
It's awesome. I've lost so many hours of my life to it, but I don't regret a thing because I love playing the game.
Until next week, gamers, Barjo out.
Hex out.
Come on, Hex, there's RPGing to be done.